So I have now made a few quick adjustments to our app. I've switched back to your sort of basic navigation link, just for ease of explanation while we go through some stuff. And I have also adjusted what gets displayed when you go to a page. Right now, what's getting displayed is the system name for that particular item, but the system's names all have it lowercased, whereas here it looks nicer uppercased. So the string itself is uppercased, and then we just call item dot lowercase, and it returns it, like cat with a lowercase c, or dog with a lowercase d, right? And then that'll get passed in for system name. We set it to resizable so that the image can be changed in size, because the images by default that come back from image system name are quite small. I believe they're 24 by 24 pixels. So we make it 64 by 64 instead. And actually we can even make it bigger, just because I know that this screen can be so teeny tiny. So we make it 128 by 128. And then we change the navigation title so that that is the text that we clicked on. So for example, if we click on dog, it will show us a dog, right? And our title is set, and that's all good. Cool. Okay. Same thing with bird, etc. They didn't have a snake, so I just did lizard and tortoise. And they have hare instead of rabbit. Don't ask me why. I don't know. Anyway, so what we're going to look at right now is how to do searching and filtering on a list. So for our list here, you'll note that we've done this thing where we have moved the list into a for each block here, like this, right? So you can, right, skip the for each block if you so desire, okay? So you can, instead just do this, right? This works just fine too, okay? However, in a little bit, we will need the for each block for one of the things that we're planning on doing, which is making this list editable. Both ways are valid. Both work just fine. They do basically exactly the same thing. It just depends on what your needs happen to be, and our needs shortly will be not this. So we're doing it this way. Either way, basically every single view that gets displayed within a list gets added to the list, right? So if we just added text where we said hello, right, then now there's a new hello right down there. And if we did this, how are you, right, like so. Now if we put these inside of the for each, then it would happen after each of the ones in here, right? And so we're going to end up with a lot of noise, right? So yeah. That said, you can also, if you use the for each approach, you can do lists, like kind of sub-lists of things, right? With sections, okay? So you can do section like this, and we can call this animals 1, right? And then you can kind of repeat that if you want. Oop, wrong button. There we go. Like so, and this is animals 2, right? And then here, this could be like items dot reversed or something like that, right? And so now it shows bird, tortoise, lizard, and so on first, right? And these are just different sections within the list. You've seen sections and lists before on iPhone apps. It's pretty basic standard stuff. Okay, cool. So that said, we're not doing sections right now. We're just doing a single for each inside of a list, okay? So we want this list to be searchable, okay? We want to be able to search for something in the list. Now, in order to search for something in the list, we need to be able to have some variable that users can modify that then allows us to search the list. So we can filter the list using this string that the user provides. Now, one of the things that you can, when we have a variable that we need to have that is something that the user will need to be able to edit, it's a state variable, right? So let's go ahead and just preemptively get our state variable here, because we know we're going to need this. We know for searching, the user types into a search bar, right? So someone's going to want a binding from us, right? So now in list here, and I just realized this split view should be navigation stack. There. Don't need that. Sorry about that. Just realized this was like that. And we should start it with default value so that it doesn't yell at us in the preview. So when we are doing this on the list, let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so we've got a bunch of stuff here, with our dot syntax. We can see, okay, list style, cool. There's a bunch of different list styles. I recommend you check them all out. They're pretty neat. Navigation title, okay, that's fine. We could use that. That's not a bad idea, right? We'll say animals, like so, right? Cool, great. The display mode, yeah, we'd prefer it to be inline rather than large, right? So it's just up there, tiny little thing like that, right? Cool, great. And as we kind of look through here, we can see, okay, so we've got all these things, right? Background, etc., line limit, whatnot, right? But remember, when you're looking for something specific to a particular type of view, you want to do your dot syntax closer, not further, right? Because there are some specific ones that will only show up on the closer one, right? Here, we want to be able to search for something. So if we start to type search, you can see that there's a ton of modifiers that involve search, okay? And the one that we really care about is searchable. Now, searchable is basically a modifier that adds a ton of functionality to your list, right? If you pass in a binding for a string, which we've set up here, filter, okay? And this is all you've done. You get a search bar that looks just like all of Apple's other search bars, right? And when you tap on it, it doesn't show here because it's a preview, but the keyboard comes up, this becomes editable, the navigation title disappears, all the back button and everything disappear while you're editing it. The cancel button shows up here in case your user wants to be done, okay? And as you type, nothing happens, right? So why does nothing happen here, okay? Well, nothing happens here because we're still displaying the same items here, right? You can make it so that the filter gets applied in a number of ways. You can create a computed property called filtered items, right? That runs the filtration, right, on your items. So this would be like items.filter, right? And then you pass in the filter, okay? Filter is included predicate string, is included string. Yeah. Oh, string throws. Oh, right. Right, that's a closure, right. Is there not one to just filter on a string? There might not be. Okay, that's fine. Item, and then we do, here it expects a Boolean response. Luckily for us, this is a very basic check, right? We can just say if item dot contains filter, okay? Now, basically, if whatever we type into the filter is contained in the item, right, then that is what, then, it gets marked as true here. And the thing that gets returned by this filter call, filtered items, is now going to be filtered. So we can do this for each instead of on items, we can do this on filtered items. Right? And now, did I do it in reverse? No. What is the, if, here we want to do like if filter dot is empty, then we return just items. Otherwise, we do this, right? There we go. This is just to make it, because when you do containment, a string containment, technically empty string will always return false. It's kind of weird, but it's how it is. So now if we search for A, or not A, sorry, cat, right, or C, or D, or L, right, then it does the search. Now it is searching in order here, like as you note, if I put A, right, actually, is it doing it because it's capitalized, or, well, whatever. I believe it's doing it in order. And we can just really quickly check that by doing a, like this, and then if we do a B, okay, it's because the capitalization. Got it. Okay. This is one of those interesting things. So one thing that's happening here is that capitalization kind of gets in your way, which is a little interesting. Like if I wanted to be able to type A and get every result that has any A in it, whether or not it's capitalized, you need to do some further, filtration. You need to do some further work here, right? Where we say item dot lowercase, right, dot contains filter dot lowercase, right? Now, when we type A, it will give every result that has an A in it, okay? Again, just one of those things you have to kind of pay attention to sometimes. Whether or not it's important to your app, whatever, right? Okay, cool. This is pretty great, right? Like this is kind of already sort of, what we want, right? We wanted to be able to like, oh, cool, these are things with R, or I don't know, like a B or a D. I'm trying to find, is there one that has like two characters that are the same? I don't think so, actually, which is really kind of interesting. AE? No. That was weird. Oh, right, because it's not doing a fuzzy search. It's doing okay. Anyway, so cool. And then you hit cancel, and you're back to your list as per normal, right? While you're editing or doing this, right, this search, this filtration, you can also click and still go somewhere, right? And when you come back, you're still in the search, and you're still doing the stuff, right? So this is how you do searchable. Okay, now you'll note searchable had a lot of different overloads, right? You can do a prompt, right, where you provide a prompt of like, hey, rather than search, right, you say, put this here, right? So like we could say filter, binding of filter, sorry. And then we could say like, animal, right? Like that. And now that shows up in our placeholder kind of text right there, right? You can do like is presented, right? You'll remember we talked about that, okay? So is presented determines whether or not, the searchable is even visible, right? So like we could say @state var present search equals false. We can do a binding to that, present search, right? Or that's not this binding, sorry. It's the next, what the heck? It's omega something. Okay, filter for the text, and then is presented gets this present search. So now the search doesn't show up. It does show up. I thought we set it to false. True? Oh, it might be overriding it because it's a list. Oh, I see. Okay, so this is presented is whether or not you're in this special state, not whether or not the search exists. Just keep that in mind. Sorry. Yeah, little things like that. So there's a bunch of different things in the API that you can use, which is pretty cool. For now, though, we're just going to stick with basic text, like so. So now, this is great. This is pretty cool. You can do all sorts of fun stuff with this. Including, there is a further modifier that you can do, which is called search scopes. However, we're not quite set up to look at search scopes here. Basically, search scopes are kind of those buttons on the top that further filter your stuff, right? So in between now and the next break, I'll get the code set up with because you need a struct data type set up, or you need a data type set up that we don't quite have here. So I'll see if I can get that set up so that we can do a scope. But I don't want to fiddle with that like live during time when I could be instead teaching you about alerts and sheets, right? So let's go ahead and consider that we want it so that when you go to one of these, right, when you click on this, something happens. We present something to you, okay? We'll talk about an alert and we'll talk about sheets, okay? So to start with, here we've got this. This is our our image, right? This is the view that the navigation link takes us to, okay? So we're gonna pull this out. No, we're not. Yeah, we are. It's fine. So we're gonna pull this out. We're gonna move it over to its own view, okay? So we're gonna call this image view, or image view already exists, so I shouldn't use that. We'll call this like show image, like that, something like that, right? Var body some view. Okay, we put this in here, and then we can now say var item string, right? And now when we do this, we can do show item or show image item, right? And now it'll work exactly as it did before, right? So this is just best practice. Kind of pull your views out as much as you can, make them as small as you can. It helps keeps things kind of easier for you to compose more and more views. Right. So now we want to do an alert. Okay. So let's go ahead and make this a VStack and add a button. Okay. So do this. And we will put a button, all right? And the button is just gonna have a title and an action. So the title is just gonna be item, right? Whatever that is. And then it's going to be like, there's gonna be an action, something to do. We'll look at that in a moment. And then we're gonna do the button style of bordered prominent. It's my favorite button style. And so now we can go here and we're on Tortoise. Cool, great. That looks weird, doesn't it? It's all smooshed. I guess it's because I'm setting it to this particular size. I think you can fix that with like aspect ratio. Dot fit, something like that. Yeah. Where's Tortoise? Here he is. Yeah, that fixes it. Looks a little weird, I think. The angles, I can't tell from this angle. Anyway, whatever. Again, that kind of fiddling, don't do it until after you get everything set up. Then you can fiddle, okay? I'm just doing it because I don't do what I do. I have too many years of doing it that way, and it doesn't work. Okay, so we've got our button here, Tortoise. So we want this to pop up an alert, and the alert tells us some fun fact about our animal. Now, right now, we don't have that data, but we can do that here. So we can create a bunch of fun facts using a dictionary, like so. So we could say tortoise, and then we can say tortoises are in fact not faster than hares and have never beaten a hare in a officially timed race, despite apocryphal tales to the contrary. Okay, tortoises are slow. That's what I'll say. Obviously, you'd want to put this in like JSON somewhere or something. We're doing an example, so it works. And we're only going to tortoise. Obviously, if we went to something else, then there wouldn't be a field for it yet. We'll add more as we go. But for now, now we go here and we'll display this fun fact to the user using an alert when they click on the button. So how do we do this? Well, on our VStack, which is kind of our outermost view within the view body, we can go here and search for an alert, okay? Now, alert primarily uses the isPresented binding style, right? So, you know, that's kind of the main way that you present views, or alerts, sorry, is by having a Boolean that gets set to true, okay? So our most basic one here, okay, is this, and it's gonna have a title key, right? And this title is gonna be like, you know, it's just gonna be the item, okay? It's just gonna be the item name. And then here in presented, we need to have a binding. Right, okay, cool, we need a binding for this. So let's go create a state variable called alert, Boolean false, right? And this needs to be a binding once again, because alerts are very well defined in Apple's kind of UI context. And so there are many ways for them to be dismissed, and Apple doesn't want you to have to catch all those ways yourself. So it's a binding so that they can just set that value back to false when they're done with presenting that view. So go to alert like that, and then there's actions here, right? Oh, right, and this needs to be a binding, of course. Whoa, don't want that stuff. Get out of here. There we go. Okay, now in here, this is code, I believe. I don't believe it's content. Actions. Oh, right. Yes, sorry. So these actions are basically buttons that can be pressed in the alert, is kind of the idea. And there are a bunch of alert like overloads, right? Where actions, message, right? Actually, we probably want message, and so on. So let's go ahead and have actions message, and that's very similar. I believe it's just going to be like this. Yeah, cool. So now we will do fun fact at item, and because accessing a text fun fact item. Now, because accessing a dictionary in this manner could result in not finding something because it might not be in the dictionary, you do need to handle that case where it's null and just pass in, you know, nothing found, like so. Okay, I need to scroll up a bit so that I'm not hitting this. Okay, so this is the message that will show up. This is what gets presented to the user is our fun fact. And then here we've got item is presented, alert, and then here we have to do, these are basically just the buttons that are going to show up. And I believe if you just do text, it like just puts it in. So I guess we'll find that out together. Super fun. And so now when we click on Tortoise, nothing happens. Why is that? It's because we don't set the alert when we're in the button, right? Don't forget, you got to change your bindings when you want something to occur. Okay? So we wait for this to finish rebuilding. It's spinning. It's having a hard time with this one. Hello? Come on. What's the issue here, SwiftUI? What's the problem? Where's the beef? All right, sometimes when it gets stuck like that, you just have to manually rebuild, and then it will do this, and you can just kind of refresh it, and now it should be all fine. Yep, cool. Okay, so now we click Tortoise, and we get an alert. Cool, right? Your alert can then have, you know, a bunch of different options, like thanks, I guess, right? Cancel and unsubscribe, right? So now when the alert comes up, each of those is a different option, right? Now, if you want those options to actually do something other than just dismiss the alert, you need to make them buttons that then have an action that you can then perform, right? So like, you know, like here you could do like button text thanks, I guess, right? And then here we will say print the user didn't like our fun fact, right? And you can log that information for your product manager, and you can tell them, see, users don't care about tortoises. And your product manager will say, you know, too bad, I like tortoises, right? So thanks, I guess, right? And the user didn't like our fun fact gets printed. So you're able to perform code in there and do stuff. Okay, cool. So, yes, that's basically sort of the kind of long and short of how you do alerts in Swift UI. If you want like one of them to be, red, which is also a very common pattern, you would just change your foreground style to red for that particular item, right? And you can do further styling, of course, by doing an H stack and then having a bunch of things inside, right? And you can do interesting things. And of course, it's blue rather than red, just because they like messing with me. What is the dot style? What is the? I think there's like a sort of. There's some sort of style you can set that will tell the alert that it can be red. I don't remember exactly what it is off the top of my head. But you'll find it in the docs. It's pretty easy to find. So, cool. Any questions about alerts before we look at sheets? Awesome. Okay. So sheets are very similar to alerts. We're going to build it in a very similar way. It's going to do something that's very similar. Okay. So we're going to close this, close this. Well, we'll just delete it all. It's fine. I don't need it, I guess. I'm going to put this over here just because I want to just be able to reuse it. Okay. So a sheet is one of those things that kind of slides up from the bottom of the screen, and it has a bunch of information. Some people call it a detail drawer. Some people call it a drawer. Some people call it, I don't know. There's like a million names for it. Apple calls it a sheet, okay? That's useful for you to know, because if you want to have a sheet and you're looking to how to add a sheet, you go .sheet. Aha, there it is. It's a sheet, right? So here we have our sheet, okay? And again, there are two forms of this pattern, right? There is this isPresented form that we've looked at for the alert, and then there's this item form, right, where it does a binding to a particular item, okay? And then it kind of passes that in, to the content, right? So we're going to take a look at this one, okay? So this item binding is, we can do a Boolean binding, or no, because a Boolean is not identifiable. And in fact, strings aren't either. So this would actually require some sort of data structure. So I guess we won't look at this one. We'll look at the isPresented. But worth noting, sheets with items basically work very similarly to navigation destination, except they bring up a sheet rather than pushing something onto the stack. Okay, so sheet is presented with content, okay? And then there's also this fun on dismiss, right? So we can take a look at that too. So here is presented. We have this alert, but we're going to rename it to sheet. Call it sheet. Okay. And now we're going to do a binding to sheet. Okay. Here we hit enter, and it creates our two closures. So this is actions to perform when sheet is dismissed. Okay. And this is the content that we actually show on our sheet. Okay. So here we're going to create our text item where we display our fun fact. Boop, like so. I didn't hit that button. Okay. So now when we go to Tortoise and we click on this button, okay, we get this full takeover sheet. It comes up all the way over the screen and it does this, right? There's no padding or anything. It looks kind of bad, right? You can do like padding like that if you want, but we don't mess around with that until we have the workflow done, right, guys? It looks nicer now. So that's one way of having a sheet. There are also some other kind of forms of sheet that you can have where you have this concept called presentation detents. So there are a few kind of, basic like, allowed detents, right? there's large and medium, and then there's like these kind of forms which take like a specific height value or a particular fraction, right? So let's go take a look. If we set it to medium, okay, the system intent for a sheet that's approximately half the height of the screen and is inactive in compact, and it continues on, but it's saying in compact horizontal, or sorry, compact vertical views, right? So if the phone was in landscape mode, rather than presenting the sheet as a popover that only covers half, it would take over the full screen because you don't have the real estate really to be only taking up half when you're in landmark mode, right? Landscape mode, sorry. Inactive in compact height, right? Cool. Okay, so dot presentation detents medium. Now when we click on Tortoise, it only comes up and covers half the screen instead of the entire screen, right? And you can use fraction and pass in like 0 to 5 if you want it to be the bottom 1/4 of the screen and be really fiddly and weird, right? And so you can do this, and now it's only the bottom 1/4 of the screen, right? Now users can dismiss sheets in sort of 2 specific ways. One, they can drag it down like so. There's a gesture component. The other is by clicking outside of the sheet if they can get outside of the sheet. If it's a full one, it's a little harder. But if it's these short stacks, then you can do it. You can also, if you want, add a button that dismisses it. Like so. Right? And then this one basically just needs to set sheet equals false. False. There we go. So now when we go there, our sheet comes up, we have this dismiss button, and it dismisses it, right? So there's essentially, typically when you have a sheet like that, there are 3 ways to kind of close it. Usually there'll be a little X button up in the top right corner, and you make that button set the presented Boolean to false. Cool. The other thing you can do, of course, is have something that happens when the sheet is dismissed. So, for example, if we wanted to save some data that the user had put in or something like that, you can do that there, right? You can say, you can also like just print out information, right? Like user dismissed sheet. Usually when I do this like sort of thing, you typically don't want to do printing in production, but this is kind of a stand-in for like submitting a metric to your backend so that they can keep track of what all your users are doing, which you will find you will be doing a lot of that in production code when you're building apps. They want you tracking kind of everything that the user does, right? So now when we get rid of this, it says user dismissed sheet, right? So it's sort of like having an on disappear, but it's like specifically when the user takes an action to dismiss the sheet, not whether or not the view that happens to be nested within that sheet gets disappeared, right? Because when that's the case, if you're reusing a view from somewhere else, right, then you don't want to be modifying the behavior somewhere else while you're using it in your sheet, right? And so if you change that somewhere, the view where it gets defined to have on disappearing, then that will run whenever it disappears anywhere in your app, rather than just in this particular sheet that gets dismissed. Okay, any questions about sheets? Awesome. I take your silence as an indication that I'm really good at my job. Okay, let's see. I think that's it for this segment. So we're going to take 5 minutes here. Whoop. And then we will be looking at asynchronous images. And I'll also try and get the search scope filter stuff set up so we can look at that as well. And then we'll talk about the final project. So any questions before the break? Awesome. All right, gonna go stop the recording.